Welcome back to the channel, everybody, as we get things rolling here with some more football around the country where we take a holistic look of all 138 FBS programs, giving you some notable transactions that happened, some key adds, some key losses that each team has taken on over the course of the offseason thus far, plus spending some time and figuring out, what is my record prediction, at least going into the spring. So diving into that for all 138 teams, and we have a brand new one on the list here today that I hope you guys are excited about. It might be a little bit lower on this team than originally anticipated, but with that being said, hopefully you guys still enjoy this video regardless, as there's a lot of work that goes into making this type of content. So if you really appreciate the content here, I would really appreciate it if you sit back, hit that like button, as well as hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into today's conversation, which actually takes us into the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. They come in as a team that barely cracks my 120. They are coming in at number 117th in the country, and it was between them and South Alabama, but I do like Coastal Carolina's program a little bit more than South Alabama at this time, so that's why Coastal Carolina slightly higher than South Alabama at this current juncture. And so let's go ahead and get into business here with this Coastal Carolina team. Definitely some intriguing things happening in the offseason, as maybe one of the more surprising fires that we have seen over the course of the offseason, and that is Tim Beck being let go. 3 decent seasons here in Conway, South Carolina. But this was a program prior to him being hired. They were just on the heels of being one of the premier G5 programs in the country. And, a lot of credit and a lot of lore is given to Cincinnati, for what they did in the 2020 and 2021 campaigns. But Coastal Carolina, mind you, was right in those conversations as well as a top G5 program. And while Tim Beck didn't do horrific, he was just not living up to expectations. So that was a huge reason why he ended up getting fired. And now we have a brand new era of Chanticleers football going into this season, and that is going to be Ryan Beard, which really cool moment earlier in spring ball. We actually did get a follow from Ryan Beard, so I'm very excited to have that follow. Really was high on him at his time at Missouri State, leading the Bears to the Xbox Bowl in their debut season at the FBS ranks, now leaving Missouri State to take this Coastal Carolina job. So excited to see what Ryan Beard can do. And if you're watching this, Coach, I can't wait to see what your tenure at Coastal Carolina looks like. But after we do a little bit of glazing of Ryan Beard there real fast, I do want to get into some of the notable additions and subtractions, because I do have at least one concern going into this year, and that is going to be what special teams going to look like at Coastal Carolina going into this season, right? Because Felipe LaForge was your starting kicker last year, and he's no longer going to be with the program. He transfers to Memphis as Charles Huff looks to retool his roster in preparation for one of the gauntlets that we have in the G5 in the American. So I'm looking at that and I'm wondering to myself, what is the special teams going to look like at Coastal Carolina? And that's important because the Eastern Division in particular, it's one of the more difficult divisions in the FBS when it comes to the G5 ranks. And it's one of the few conferences, actually, it's the only conference in the FBS that still does divisions. The eastern side is a little bit tougher than the western side, and I think that's only grown over the last couple of years. So what special teams going to look like? That's going to be the biggest question for me. I do think that they did a decent job of replacing the edge talent that they lost in the transfer portal. They lost Dunham Campbell, who had a solid year for the Chanticleers last year. He had 5.5 sacks. And he's now going to be at the power conference ranks. He's going to play at West Virginia moving forward as Rich Rod continues his rebuild in Morgantown. So, but in spite of losing him, I mean, it's not a team that has a tremendous amount of losses, which is a little bit surprising given normally in this era when we see coaching changes, there usually is much more turmoil, and they really didn't have that in terms of guys that were actually productive for this football team last year. So that's an encouraging sign, and they did a decent job of backfilling that talent, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, to a point where I actually think this defense could be better than what it was last year, bringing in not only a Donovan Grayson, for example, who was part of that Stanford football team that had so many rough moments at the FCS ranks. He was still a bright spot for him last year, had 7 sacks last season. So Donovan Grayson is certainly a name to watch. Alongside a Azarel Justice, a linebacker from Bryant who transfers in, who had multiple interceptions and 58 tackles. And of course, rounding things out in the secondary, Jalen Lee from South Dakota State. He could be a potential breakout player as well for the Chanticleers, someone that I would not be too terribly shocked about if Jalen Lee is able to crack the starting lineup for the Chanticleers this upcoming season. So while I'm concerned about the secondary and I don't know if the offensive consistency is going to be there, I do think that at the very least the defense is going to be there. It's just the thing is for Ryan Beard is how is he going to navigate what is the one of the more difficult divisions in college football, with it being the Sun Belt East, as well as trying to get some more offensive consistency overall because it's essentially the same offense as last year, which could be a good or bad thing depending on how you feel, Coastal Carolina. So that's what I'm looking at from that aspect. So team that went 6-6, they before the Tim Beck firing, and I think there is a possibility because it is one of the more difficult schedules in the Sun Belt that they actually could finish below 500. So let's go ahead and take a look at the schedule so that you guys can have an idea of what I'm talking about. So Coastal Carolina quietly has one of the tougher schedules in the entirety of the Sun Belt, and that's just courtesy of being in the East. You got some more difficult teams in there. And to be fair, the East Division has 4 of the 6 top schedules in the Sun Belt from a strength perspective. We do talk about a instant revenge game. We're gonna see Ezekiel Durham Campbell suiting up for the other side, and they're gonna see this Coastal Carolina team first things first in week number 1. So they go to Morgantown to play that game. So I don't exactly expect them to come into Morgantown and win that game. You know, we see them against power conference competition, and do think that looking at what they did against Virginia last year and how things did not look very good at all in power conference competition, not surprised at all. That the it looks like it's going to be a safe loss there for the Chanticleers, but there's some tough games that they're going to have to navigate as well in conference play too. You know, we were talking about Marshall, you know, and Tony Gibson was able to surprise some people last year, fielded a surprisingly competitive team and expected to take a jump in year number 2. Plus, going on the road is not an easy task either in this conference. I mean, your last 2 games, arguably your 2 toughest games in this conference, right? You got Louisiana. Louisiana, I've already hammered this point multiple times at this juncture in this series. You know, when it comes to previous deep dives, you know, they have some guys that now have experience, so that's going to be a tough out in the Sun Belt. And then James Madison still has a lot of talent. You know, maybe not the same talent base that they had last season, but there's still some talent that they can work off of. And Billy Napier is more than capable of winning the Sun Belt as well. So that's going to be some really tough games for him to handle as well. And then even some of the home games and the non-conference games, for example. I mean, they do play against 2 CUSA teams. Delaware on the road, they have quite a bit of returning talent and continuity. Kind of fizzled a little bit in the second half of the season, but Delaware is still a good football program. And you have to go on the road to play against this Delaware football squad. So that's something to monitor. Liberty, also a prideful program as well. That's going to test Coastal Carolina. It's a good measuring stick game. Those 2 games right there. And then even some of the home games that they have, Georgia Southern at home. Georgia Southern can certainly make some noise this year under Clay Helton, in spite of the fact that they did lose J.C. French. And then Appalachian State, they got a brand new coaching staff, or a relatively new coaching staff, as Dow Loggins trying to build off of a 5-8 season off of his own right. That's not going to be easy either. Old Dominion, because Ricky Ron finally turned the corner completely, or was that more Colton Joseph's doing? That's going to be an interesting one. And then Butch Jones over at Arkansas State. There's some sneaky good coaches in this conference that is going to make it difficult for them to win some games in the first year of Ryan Beard's tenure. I do feel really comfortable with the idea of them going in and handling business against Fordham right away. They are more than good enough to win the FCS game, but you're looking at a scenario though where they are going to fall short of that 6-6 benchmark that we saw the last couple of years. But that's okay because you're looking at a program that's trying to set a new foundation that was okay with mediocrity. You're trying to get that mediocrity out of the building, and you're trying to get people that genuinely want to be there, to be a part of your team. So, candidly, I do have that 3-9 record, but it's if they were in the west part of the Sun Belt, you're probably looking at a bowl team realistically. It's just don't really love the split here in terms of home games and road games. Like for example, the Georgia State game, if that was at home, that might be a safe win for example. And then ditto with Marshall and Louisiana. Those games might have been winnable games if they were at home too. Just some things like that give me some pause in terms of being super high on Coastal Carolina going into this year. But hey, with that being said, hopefully they can prove me wrong. And listen, there is a best case scenario where you're looking at this Coastal Carolina team and you're looking at them going 8-4 as a best case scenario. That is certainly in there. Just some good coaches that they're going to go up against. And Ryan Beard is going to have to prove himself because the level of coaching in the Sun Belt certainly higher than what you normally would see in the Conference USA. So it's going to be some proving ground for Ryan Beard. I think he's capable of it. But we'll see what he is made of over the course of the regular season. But that's about going to wrap things up here for right now on the Coastal Carolina deep dive. Little surprised that I came out to a 3-9 record. But that's just how it fell after I picked every single game for the like every FBS game. It sometimes it just works out like that. I'm curious to hear what you guys think in terms of Coastal Carolina football going into the fall. Am I a little bit too low on Coastal Carolina? Should I be higher on Coastal Carolina? Definitely let me know in the comments section, as well as general feedback on this series as well. And then on top of that, if you've really been appreciating the series, I would genuinely appreciate it from the bottom of my heart if you would hit that like button and hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new, but hey, with that being said, I'm going to come at you next time with another team that we're going to take a look at from a 50,000 foot perspective. But with that, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.